The women, the children, the old, and all your knights and soldiers, and your queen. No one will be harmed, I swear to God.
Sultan Salahuddin Ayubi was born in the Iraqi city of Tikrit. His real name was Abul Muzaffar Yousaf ibn Ayub, but people in the West called him Salahuddin or Saladin. Salahuddin Ayubi was born into a well-known family of Kurds. On the night he was born, his father Najm Ayub moved his family to Aleppo and went to work for the powerful Turkish government of Najm, Syria, Imad Zang ibn Aq. Saladin seems to have had a normal childhood in Balbek and Damascus. He was more interested in studying religion than in becoming a soldier. In the history of Islam, there are many stories about brave generals who did a lot for the glory of Islam. One of these generals was Salahuddin Ayubi, who was at the top of the list because of his great leadership. And not only that, he made up his fact that the army was smaller and didn't have as many weapons. Saladin may have been the most famous Muslim soldier after Ali ibn Talib. He had a strong will and changed the way history went. It is well known that he was able to get the Crusaders out of the Palestine and Syria. Less well known is the fact that he was able to create a single solid Islamic government with no internal cracks. This gave Muslims the chance to run the world for a short time. Saladin's generation not only took back Jerusalem but also built an Islamic empire in India and briefly stopped the Crusaders from taking over Spain and northern Africa. He also inspired his troops to do things in battle that were beyond brave. He was called Scourge of God and Retribution from the Lord. The European kings respected him as the worthy enemy. When talking about his military career, Salahuddin Ayubi went to Egypt with his uncle Shirkho in 1167. They were sent there by Nuruddin Zangi, the ruler of Mosul and Aleppo, to help the ruler of Fatimid fight of the Crusaders. Salahuddin took over as vizier of Egypt after the death of his uncle. His dominion once extended from the highlands of Kurdistan to Libya. The Seljuks conquered the Byzantine Empire in the Battle of Manzikh in 1071. They also presented a threat to Constantinople. Alexius, the ruler of Byzantine realm, immediately requested assistance from European rulers to prevent the collapse of his empire. On the Pope's command, armies assembled, but instead of aiding the Byzantine emperor, they marched to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim dominion. The Crusades showed that the West didn't think Muslim from better than them. The goal was to get back the Holy Land, and this message was spread all over Europe by the Pope. The Crusader armies took control of the Holy City on July 13, 1099, after a week-long siege. It happened for 62 years to the day after Caliph Umar came to the city. When the Seljuk Empire now fragmented into several kingdoms, Muslims faced formidable challenge in their war against the Crusaders. Nuruddin Zangi, his son, kept up his work to bring Muslims together. Nuruddin was a man of exceptional skill, orchestrated a methodical operation to drive the Crusaders from West Asia. Systematically, Nuruddin's officers conquered the whole of the northern Iraq, eastern Syria, and eastern Anatolia. Saladin became an independent ruler when Nuruddin Zangi passed away, and he went on to conquer Syria and became the Sultan of Egypt, Hijaz, Yemen, and Syria. In addition to these territories, he also ruled Yemen. Salahuddin Ayubi is credited for fending off multiple raids on the Egypt by Crusaders, putting down revolts within the army, and providing Egypt with a break from its constant internal conflict. Salahuddin Ayubi also made the decisions to free Jerusalem because it felt it was his religious duty to free the holy city. However, during this period, a group known as Hashashin, sometimes known as Assassins, rose to prominence and made two unsuccessful attempts to kill Ayubi. Ayubi agreed to cease fire with the Knight Reynald of Jerusalem, but Reynald broke the agreement on many occasions by attacking and murdering Muslim pilgrims and stealing from their caravans. Salahuddin Yousaf ibn Ayub known as Saladin in the Western world, had a reputation for being a courageous and forgiving warrior who was renowned for showing kindness even to his worst adversaries. In addition to praying at various times during the day, he would also have an imam there to guide him through his prayers. Nevertheless, in the case that the imam was not there, he would pray behind any other pious researcher or Muslim. Except for the last 3 days of his life when he was in coma before he passed away, he never skipped a prayer in his whole life. He spent the rest of his days after his many conquests and many successes in prayers and charity, constructing schools and hospitals and creating a fair government in all the realms. Salahuddin Ayubi died on March 4, 1193 at the age of 57, and the Ayubi dynasty continued to control Syria and Egypt for decades after his death. His residence was worth 47 dirhams and 1 dinar at the time, and he left no land or other property behind him. He was a great military commander who was revered even by his adversaries. He had a strong trust in God which gave him strength.
You promised. You promised to return Jerusalem. Don't forget.
After his conquest of Jerusalem, he was kind and merciful. He showed tremendous magnanimity to Christians and Jews.
The Christians butchered every Muslim within the walls when they took this city.
I am not those men. I am Salahuddin. Salahuddin.
Faith in God and affection for his people were the key to his success.
What is Jerusalem worth?
Everything.